House. You want to introduce her?
Sure. So we're happy to have Nashville Ballet with us today, and Artistic Director and CEO, right, Paul Vasterling, and from Vanderbilt University, Mitchell Korn. And they've been in partnership already in programs at the ballet, and we're so happy to celebrate this particular show, Modern Masters, and you're going to see why in just a moment. So on behalf of me and Gail and the end of the Lunchbox season, have a wonderful summer and enjoy yourselves today.
And we'll see you in the fall.
Welcome, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here and to have on my left side Paul Vasterling, a man I absolutely love working with, and we have many conversations in front of the public. We also have conversations outside of the public, but we believe that when we talk authentically about the music and the dance that we are about to see and hear, it helps all of us learn and enjoy performances more. So Paul, just to begin with, this season, the Modern Masters season, is an essential cornerstone to the artistic mission of the Nashville Ballet. Tell us why.
Well, our mission is we create, perform, teach, promote dance as an essential and inspiring element of our community. And these works that we're going to give you little samples of today are very, very inspiring, and in many different ways. They are masterworks from the great choreographers of recent yesterday and of today, and they represent a sort of a kind of a milestone in the Nashville Ballet's history. The company is a little over 30 years old, and the fact that we're doing all three of these choreographers who are world-renowned in this rep means a lot for us. It's a great sort of stamp of approval, but also, most importantly, artistically, these are really fantastic works that will do what art is supposed to do, which is make you think, make you thoughtful, transform your life in some small or big way.
I know also how important doing work like this is for the company and for the company's experience. And tell us about how you've watched them and seen them in rehearsal taking on the repertoire.
Again, you know, the dancer career is not a really long one. It's like a professional athlete, and they are so hungry to do work, and to do work like this makes a big difference in them for their artistic fulfillment, to be able to do these works and these amazing voices of these choreographers, but it also makes them better artists. So there's all of these facets that are important reasons for us to do these ballets.
So we're going to see an excerpt from the second movement of Western Symphony, choreographed by the master himself, George Balanchine, with American folk music that's been orchestrated by Hershey Kay. And what should we be looking for in this excerpt, Paul?
It's a lot of fun, for one thing, but the Balanchine, as you know, is the sort of father of American ballet, who happens to be from Russia and lived in Russia at the end of the imperial reign of the Tsar, and then during the First World War and Second World War sort of bounced around Europe and ended up in the United States. His heritage, has anybody in here seen The Sleeping Beauty, the ballet The Sleeping Beauty? Raise your hand. Anybody seen it? Yeah, it's that is, in a way, the kind of essence of what Balanchine's heritage is. So if you think of that ballet in its form, and when I talk about form, the way they treat each other in the choreography. There's a formal way, but also formal means that he makes patterns. There's choreographic patterns. So if you think of that ballet and the essence of that, and then you filter it through this Russian guy who lived in Paris and then moved to New York and experienced the speed and the quickness of American culture, and also fell in love with cowboys and the American West. I know that's a long one. If you think of all those things, you get Western Symphony. It is sort of this campy, fun piece that but is also based entirely in this academic, formal ballet that was learned by Balanchine in The Sleeping Beauty. Balanchine was a rat in the original Sleeping Beauty that happened in the late 19th century. So we're going to see the second movement, I think.
Yes,
and,
we are.
This is, you'll understand in a minute. He pokes a little bit of fun at the ballet. So one thing at the classic ballet, and one thing you can look for is this one particularly, he's making fun of Giselle. So if you've seen Giselle, look for little teeny little pokes at Giselle. But let me tell you who's going to perform it for you. It's Molly Sansone with Brett Seablom and Emma Town, Emma Matthews, Kennedy Brown, and Imani Sailors. So I think we're ready for that, right?
Oh, yes, let's see it. I'm very lucky I have the opportunity to work with this company and Paul for almost the last 5 years. I'm kind of like a aesthetic archaeologist or anthropologist with you, Paul. So I know one thing about you. Every time you watch your company, no matter how many times you've seen them do a particular piece, you see more. So I know you just saw things that I would love you to share with our audience.
You know, the four ladies in the ensemble are from the second company, NB2, Nashville Ballet 2, and just give them a really great compliment. They're amazing young women. And so I was actually checking out how well they were doing. Yes, you were right. And then there's a couple of technical things. What I got aesthetically, though, and is this idea that Balanchine played with, and it's a lot of Giselle in that she, you know, in Giselle, she leaves him forever, and there was this whole play on that right then and there at the end. So that ballet was created in 1954, and it's been done many, many times. It's hugely popular across the world, actually, and it's this kind of a caricature of American West, but it takes 24 women and 12 men, so 36 people have to be there, and it kind of takes every force of person at Nashville Ballet, both the first company and the second company, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to do it, was to put our second company out on the main stage for everybody to see.
It's so great that you brought up about the year of its premiere. You know, that was the same years where bebop music began in America. Charlie Parker recorded Now's the Time in 1952, and just this outburst of great work that would become our bridge to the rest of the world. And it's so great to see this piece. But we need to move on to the next one.
Yes.
We're going to now talk about Ghosts, which was choreographed by Christopher Wheeldon, and music by Grammy-nominated and Nashville's own Kip Winger. And this piece is thought of as a very kinesthetic, active, dancey, whole-bodied piece. So tell us about this work and what matters to you about it.
It started with the music. The reason we're doing it is because Kip Winger is a friend of mine, and of course lives here in Nashville. And we'd met via other musician friends, and I found out that he'd created this piece of music that was premiered at San Francisco Ballet in 2010, and called Ghosts. And interesting thing about Kip is that he used to be a ballet dancer. He's about my age and has always wanted to, he was training to be a professional ballet dancer, and took another path, which was a group called Winger, which is they call it glam hair metal, quote unquote. And Kip had his band was called Winger, but always had in his heart this idea of doing a ballet, somehow got it in front of this music that he wrote, this beautiful classical music, in front of this renowned choreographer, Christopher Wheeldon, whose work, back to what Mitchell was saying, is very balletic, and it takes the vocabulary of ballet really to a new level of neoclassicism or slightly contemporary, in that he twists the form, and it's still, if you look at it closely though, it is still very ballet. And I think that's what it's about. It's this beautiful score that's piano and strings only, I believe. And I think we're going to show you the pas de deux from it. It's the central work. And if you can think about sort of an underwater scene, it's very, very flowy. And obviously we're in practice clothes today. You're just seeing us in rehearsal clothes. So the costumes of this are these white flowing pieces that kind of add to the swirliness and roundness, I guess, of the movement.
Wonderful. Let's see this.
Oh, and this is, let me just tell you who's going to see it
important
first. Kayla Rouser and John Uplegger dancing the pas de deux from Ghosts.
As it was finishing, Paul leaned over to me and said, "Isn't it gorgeous?" And Paul, again, you've watched this a lot of times. I mean, tell me what you just saw.
It's just so beautiful. Those two together actually make magic, of course. They're such one beautiful artist. But also, what's interesting about Wielden is that he is in the heritage of Balanchine. Wielden is an Englishman, Christopher Wielden, but he started dancing at the Royal Ballet, but then switched to the New York City Ballet, and was a dancer there for a while, and absorbed all of the sort of Balanchinian lessons and Robbins lessons that were there, and then it came out with this thing. So you can see this little heritage. What's interesting about this work is that it also is sort of presentational. It's out to you. Wielden is like an expert at this male-female duet form, and this particularly where the man is presenting the woman. That's a very classical ballet thing. What you're going to see in a little bit is Killian, also a master of the duet, but a different kind of master. So,
Yes,
yeah,
well, that's a
good?
great segue, because now we'll move to the third work of this great masterwork series, and it's Killian's 6 dances done to Mozart's 6 German dances, and it is it's a very unusual work because it's like a dialectic. It's like this. Yeah. It's funny, yeah. Humorous, and it's also odd.
He's a master choreographer, and I'm going to give a quote about Killian by this New York Times critic. Anna Kiselkoff said, "Scores of younger choreographers being influenced by the emotional and kinetic thrust of his signature style, a highly physical fusion of ballet technique with the idiomatic freedom of modern dance." And that is a really great description of him and the way he's very much about humanness, you know, and this, and he uses gesture, small gesture and large gesture, and his duets in many cases are more about the weight and the power between the two people in the duet as opposed to the presentation of one or the other. So you'll see it's a little bit more like a more social dancing, actually, if you think of it that way. This work particularly, is really funny on the outside. Killian himself designed the costumes, which you will not see today, but he calls them Mozartian underwear, and they have on powdered wigs, and even though it is very funny and about human foibles, and he's particularly making fun of the culture of the 18th century in which Mozart lived, it's also very contemporary, and there's a little tiny bit of darkness and sexuality that underlies the entire work. It's a partner piece. This 6 dances is a partner piece to an earlier Killian work that we did called Petite Mort that you guys may have seen us do in last year. I think it was in 2016 last we did it.
Mm-hmm. And we're about to see the first dance from the 6 dances.
The first movement from 6 dances is short, but it's significant, and it's going to be presented by Katie Eliasson and Judson Veach. Oh, are we going to talk to those dancers too?
I think at the end.
Okay, good.
Yes. So let's go. So Paul, let's get into your third eye again, but we are joined, we are very lucky to have Kayla and John. Hey, welcome.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
That piece, just to note, 1986, so it's the works we're doing are 1986, 2010, and 1954, interesting years of creation. And I don't know, you want to talk to these guys about?
Sure, we're very fortunate to have Kayla and John. You know, I think it's so indispensable to an audience's experience to get perspective from the artists and the work you do and how you think about it. So could you talk to it, your experience of dancing, the piece that you're doing? It was beautiful. And, you know, we know when Paul says, spontaneously from his lips, gorgeous. He means it, and I know how much you sacrificed to create this beautiful work. So tell us about it.
We'll let Kayla start then, because she's the one that makes it look gorgeous.
Can't do it without a good partner. I really think, especially approaching the pas de deux from Ghost that we just showed you, I think there's so many, it's the transitions in it that make it really difficult, and I think that's what just experience as an artist, trying to fine-tune those with your partner and within your own craft. That's what makes the difference between just going out and just doing the steps, but being able to tell a story, or whether it's something that doesn't have a story that you kind of put one in for yourself, but really finding a way to make each step mean something, even if it's really small, or your back is to the audience so that they know that you're still connected. I think that keeps everyone engaged, and that's something we've really been able to work on throughout the process with this one.
Yeah, I think we haven't had a chance to work with Mr. Wielden yet, the choreographer for Ghost, but we had a guest stager, Jason Fowler, come in and work with us for about 2 weeks. And with something like this that's got more movement in it, and the music is gorgeous, sort of like sweeping and full, especially in this pas de deux, Jason really got on us to make the positions, the lines, as we're moving through them, as well as trying to be precise on the musicality, which can be a little bit more difficult in something like this. There's the downbeat's a little bit harder to hear. So him getting us in tune with the music, just hearing it over and over and over again, to where we're making sure we're being consistent about where we're putting things. But then from there, try not to let it get too stale, to keep it moving, keep the length, keep the breath in it as we go. That's been the biggest challenge for this piece, but it's been a fun challenge. We've been enjoying it.
It's a signature style of Wielden to that flowiness, and I don't know if you can hear John alluding to what it takes to put on one of these and how it is. We have to be licensed, and we have to get permission from the Wielden and the Balanchine and the Killian foundations or organizations in order to do the work. And then they send an official stager down, that named Jason Fowler in the Wielden case, to work with the company for a period of time, and then they'll be back when we present the performances in early May, which I hope you'll all come to and bring your friends. Can you guys talk to us a little bit about what it means to do these works, and what it, how it, as you as artists and as part of your career, and that line?
Absolutely. I think I can speak for most of the company when I say this. The opportunity to do the works that we're doing in this show coming up in May is huge for us. Just to be able to have 3 pieces, getting to do one of these would be spectacular and a huge accomplishment for not only Nashville Ballet, but for us as artists. But getting to have a show that has 3 ballets like this on the bill is really, really spectacular. And it's stretching all of us in ways that we haven't necessarily been stretched before, because they're all so new to us. And there's lots of different partnerships, especially with Western, we are dancing with a lot of the second company, which is really wonderful to get to know some of them in a more close aspect in the rehearsal process. So this is a really big, it's a big task we're taking on, and we're really proud to be able to give a performance of this caliber to our city.
Yeah, I think being here, I've been with the company now since 2000, so sort of seeing where the company's grown and where it's gotten to in that time. I mean, I've always enjoyed my time here, and feel fortunate to have gotten to do the pieces that we've had a chance to perform on this stage. But yeah, getting a chance to do something like this, like Kayla's saying, with these 3 choreographers, it sort of puts Nashville Ballet on the map. And for the dancers, it really inspires us to sort of keep growing and keep performing. I mean, we couldn't do Western Symphony unless the company from top to bottom, all the way down to the second company, was at a caliber that we could perform these kind of pieces. So with 36 people on stage, you know, you've got to have strength through the whole ranks of the company to be able to do a work like that. So to me, being here over the period of time I have, that's something that I think is most spectacular about it.
You know, one of the great experiences of coming to see the Nashville Ballet is the presence of live music. And they use a pretty good pit band, the Nashville Symphony. And tell us, you know, the experience you have. I know that you'll be dancing. You've studied this music. The music is so highly organized. It's complex. How's the experience going to be after all this preparation, you know, performing it with the symphony?
The first night when we are in our tech weeks, the week leading up to performances, the first show, or the first rehearsal, excuse me, that we have with the symphony always is a game changer. We have been listening to the exact same thing every time, but there's something so different about hearing it live and being able to feel that reverberation throughout the theater that brings a whole different level to the performance than you just can't recreate it, I think, in the studio. So it makes it even more magical.
It's something to be really proud of, actually. I'm going to brag for a minute. Nashville Ballet, we do live music. It's very rare we don't have a performance accompanied by live music, and it's appropriate for Music City, a ballet company in Music City, to have that because of the caliber of people who live here. You know, I have colleagues in other cities larger than this, actually, who do not have an orchestra for their performances. And as Kayla was saying, it makes what you as an audience member see all the more intense, I guess, and magical because of that synergy that happens between the dancers and the orchestra.
Are we allowed to talk about the start of next season, like where we're headed?
Sure.
So I was talking to a board member last week at a dinner function, and she was saying the company just finalized a deal. We're going to go perform at Chautauqua up in New York to start our season next year, take a tour up there. She was saying one of the big reasons that Nashville was in the running for being one of the companies to go up there and perform is because of the commitment to working with live music. And that's something that she was saying they look for. The presenter looks for companies that work with live music. And I think that speaks a lot to making it such a priority here to always have live music. And for the dancers, it's phenomenal. I mean, it brings such an energy. Like Kayla saying, it's a game changer when you're on stage and you feel that kind of energy with the music behind you.
It's the only time I ever miss being a performer. I don't miss it at all, except for that first rehearsal where I'm standing and I start to hear the music. Wow, this is really cool. And that would be, you know, I couldn't do it, of course, but it would be the...
You know, just a moment of relativity. Paul, tell us about just the few other companies that use as much music as Nashville.
Gosh, there certainly aren't any that I can think of offhand that use as much live music as us, that every performance we do it. It's just the rarest of the rare that we don't have a live element and of what we do. I mean, actually, it's New York City Ballet, the big company in New York, and San Francisco Ballet in over there. Those are really huge organizations. And also, I'll also brag again, that we commission music a lot here. We commission scores from composers, and we're all about collaborating musically, and we would probably be, you know, third or fourth or maybe fifth on the list of who commissions scores for their ballet and does new work. So that's another thing for us to be proud of.
It's a lot to be proud of, and it's one of the things that actually merges the ballet with the other great artistic talent in the city. And to dance to live music, you know, I know you've spoken to it. Do you guys know the symphonic players pretty well? You know, so you say hi to them in the pit, and you know they love working with you guys, and that's rare. Don't tell them I said so. So we have a little bit of time to get some questions from the audience, and I'm gonna, because we can't quite see. Oh yes, we have one over here.
Yes, I have a question for
That's interesting. You guys gonna?
Goodness. It definitely adds pressure. I think especially when you realize that they are going to be in the studio. I think it's when you can actually see the person versus just knowing that they may pass through, they might come to a performance, but we'll have the opportunity to work with Christopher Wheeldon for a few days, which is a pretty big deal. And so there's a lot of pressure. I think I already have in my mind like how many days it is until he'll be here for rehearsal. So it does, but it also, there's something really special about that because you actually get feedback directly from the person who created it. And that's not always the case. It's someone who that person has entrusted to pass on that information, but there's nothing like getting it straight from the person who envisioned it.
Yeah, getting that kind of stuff firsthand, that information firsthand is, I mean, there's nothing like it. Plus the fact that like sometimes you're working with a choreographer, maybe the second, third, fourth time that they're setting the piece, staging the piece, restaging it, they might want to make some tweaks as they go through. So being a part of the process again, I mean, you weren't there maybe when they first created it, but even in restaging like that, you're sort of part of the process of putting the production back up on stage again. And I always enjoy that kind of stuff.
Do we have another question? Good question.
There's a lot of different ways. Stagers have different methods of it, different like notation systems. Each stager kind of has their own deal and they use most of the time. But you guys want to? You've probably, both of you have actually probably taught some stuff too. So.
Actually working with Killian Stager for the last section that you saw, the last piece. And this is the first time I've seen this, and I was asking him about it a little bit. He's got a notebook that's he brought with him to set the ballet, where it's got the music staff coming across the top, so he knows his musicality, and then he's got clips, like shots that he's pulled from the video. So I was talking to him, he works on a laptop, and he's able to like take a freeze frame shot of that moment in time and puts it right underneath the staff and music so he knows what it looks like when he wants to set it on what count, which I think is really beneficial. I mean, otherwise, you're trying to sort of write down the names of the steps, but it's something like that that's much more contemporary. It can be difficult to sort of know what your facing is, what the shape is, so I think that's a neat way of doing it. It's the first time I've ever seen it.
Neat. It is.
A combination of writing it down and trying to describe what it looked like, if you can imagine, and then video. You know, we show video, but I mean, in the days before video, it was only an oral tradition, really, from one dancer to the next. So, which is a whole nother conversation. We could spend a whole hour on it about, you know, what did the ballets of Petipa look like? What did the original Sleeping Beauty look like? We think we know what the original choreography looked like, but because it was taught by this oral tradition, how did it change over time?
It's kind of like a game of telephone.
Yeah, a little bit.
But there really actually was a formal notation system that was tried for decades. It still exists because it actually used the shapes of dancers. It was trying to imitate musical notation. But video absolutely changed it, didn't it, Paul?
Yeah. I mean, it's called, there's a couple of notations, Benish and Laban, and Benish is the ballet one. Very, very complex. If you can think of a musical staff, they divide the body into 5 areas, and then they have little shapes that represent your head and your arms, and then they have little like apostrophes and semicolons and things like that that tell you where your legs are supposed to go. You have to have this amazingly analytic mind, and you have to go to school for a long time. And the truth is that because it's expensive to have someone notate it in video is a little bit more efficient nowadays. However, if you think about it, for example, if you do something by a video, dancer X messed up that choreography that night that it was videoed. Think about it. And then for all time, the choreography is messed up because dancer X messed it up that night. Whereas a written down score, it's approved, and it's really truly that's really a good way to do it.
Yeah.
If you can.
Other questions? It's hard for us to see up here. Up over here?
Yes, ma'am.
Speak up.
let's see, if we open a show on a Friday night, we usually have the Symphony on Wednesday night. So it's not a lot of time. It's definitely adequate to get prepared for the shows that weekend. But that is one of the things that makes it difficult. If there's a recording, and it's kind of similar to notating the choreography, if someone came in too soon on an entrance musically, and that's what we've rehearsed to in the studio, but then it may sound different on stage, you just sort of have to relearn counts or relearn what it is you need to listen to for those entrances. But some of that is actually what makes it really special, is that you hear even more than you do on a recording. So sometimes you've been rehearsing to, a set track, and then all of a sudden you hear parts of the music and the score that you never heard before. So it has its, I don't know, I guess pros and cons, but it definitely it's something that adds to the performance.
We try as much as we can to, some ballets have piano scores written for them, so I try to bring the musician into the studio with the dancers, because it makes them better dancers, better artists, because they have to be more alive and sensitive to what's happening in that moment, and they're able to react to what's happening in the music. And that, of course, obviously that makes the performance more alive to us, because it feels so immediate and so truthful and not canned, for lack of a better word. So, for example, for Nutcracker, we always have a period where we bring in a rehearsal pianist, and they, because they're humans and not a machine, they change it, not purposefully, but it makes it them better, and makes them, and you guys can comment on that process as well.
Yeah, just on a quick note, we haven't experienced this yet, but the stager for Ghost was telling us that the opening of the ballet is a violin solo. So what we've been rehearsing to every day won't be really how it's going to sound when they play it, because it's actually, I guess, written into the score for the violinist to have some freedom about how they play that. So we're really going to have to be in tune with hearing that and listening to it as we go, which I'm kind of excited for.
Well, and I've just heard that Jun Iwasaki is going to be the one doing it, the concertmaster for the Nashville Symphony. What an extraordinary player. That's going to be even better, even more fun. I know we were also talking in that last question about tech. And when do you guys first get to experience the lighting, the costumes, and so you can actually put all of these parts together?
It is. It's sort of, there's layers to it. So we learn all of our choreography. We're rehearsing that for a few weeks. Layered in, you start to have costume fittings. And then a lot of times, the skirt that I wore today is a mock-up of what the skirt looks like of my costume. So I'm able to practice in that to get used to it and to see how it affects any partnering with John. And then today, actually, when we head back to the studio, we're going to do a costume run of a ballet that we are doing, Carmina Burana. It's another one of Paul's ballets that we are doing in Charleston next weekend. So if anyone wants to road trip, we'll be in Charleston next weekend. But we layer those things on so that, because sometimes when you try on a new costume, it does affect the partnering, or it may be you need a costume to be a little tighter or looser so that you can be able to articulate the movements that we need. So all of that gets layered in, so by the time we're on the stage, the lights are the last thing, really, that you have to adjust to.
We have time for one more question.
It's really hard to see here.
Well, are there any out there? Well, thank you so much, folks, for being here today. And we particularly want to thank Kayla and John and Molly and the company and NB2 and, of course, Paul Vasterling, the artistic director. Thank you, everybody, for being here.